And the men actually have the audacity to yell at Odysseus, "Pray to Poseidon! Sir, you are the one who did the thing. You had to have the hamburgers." Well, damn, let me just go over there and grab you all the presents that you might want, or great warrior who killed so many men. Or better yet, how about I just eat a couple of you? Then there will be less great warriors. I think that'll be better for everybody. And so the family tree becomes even more gnarly. The ancient Greeks. The Appalachians have nothing on us. There was so much anointing oneself with oil in that book. Here, will this work? So, last week I saw The Odyssey, the new Christopher Nolan movie. It has had quite a bit of controversies prior to its release, from the casting to the costuming to even the setting. And I mean, I have to say, I was a bit skeptical on some of them. I mean, this poster really didn't help, but I tried to go in with an open mind. I read The Odyssey somewhere probably at the end of high school, and so I didn't really remember much about it. So I was actually planning to reread it for this movie. If anyone's interested, I read the Butler translation, the really old one from like the year 1900. It's in prose form and written in relatively understandable English, and it's available for free from the Gutenberg Library if anyone's interested. I'll be jumping quite a bit from movie to original book plot, and will try to give you any relevant details I can think of, and a couple mythical side tangents. My name, for all intents and purposes here, is Charlotte, so let's go! I do ask you to excuse any mispronunciations, this is gonna be a tough one. The movie and the book have quite different openings. Homer, as a YouTuber in spirit, kind of gives you a couple pages of sneak peeks into the story that's coming. So he mentions the current trouble that Odysseus has with the nymph Calypso, and he also mentions the past adventure that he had with Polyphemus, the cyclops. So both of these sound quite intriguing to a new reader. Then he mentions a bunch of gods and kind of their standing on the issue of Odysseus coming home. So now the table is set. And then we go to Ithaca, the home where Odysseus is supposed to be so desperately trying to return to. We open the movie on the shot of a bard, a storyteller, narrating to us and the men gathered in a hall feasting the story of the war in Troy. Nolan's interpretation of a bard is kind of an interesting one, and I mean, I can't say I would have enjoyed it if I was there, but a man hitting a stick on the ground and saying, "A fleet, a fall, a war, a thought, a trick," the man, the myth, the legend, did set up quite an epic atmosphere. The men sitting in the hall are the suitors. Apparently, they have been feasting in the house of Penelope and Telemachus, the wife and son of Odysseus, for years now, with the pretense of vying for Penelope's hand in marriage. Of course, with her hand in marriage will also come the throne of Ithaca. So, you know, advantageous marriage prospect, wouldn't you say? The setup in the room for Penelope is quite interesting. She is in this separate room right next to the Hall of the Suitors, but they're separated by a screen, so she's not very clearly visible to them, kind of tantalizing. She's in there all day, every day, what seems like, weaving a shroud for Odysseus' father for when he dies. And before she finishes the shroud, she's refusing to get remarried. Of course, this is the official reason that she gives. The actual reason, which everybody knows about anyway, is that she still believes that one day Odysseus, whom she loves very, very much, will return home. So for a while now, she has been walking this tightrope of like encouraging some of the suitors, pitting them against each other, but not choosing any of them, basically just buying time for Odysseus to finally come home. But at the beginning of the movie, we learn that the Council of Elders, who we don't know anything about and don't really learn anything about, so whatever, has actually decided that it's time for her to remarry. Ithaca needs a king who can raise an army and protect them from the possible threat from the sea. It's mysterious. You might ask, but what about Telemachus? Isn't he Odysseus' son? Isn't he like 20 years old by now? Shouldn't he just take the throne? And it's a little bit more complicated than that. Odysseus really made a mess of things when he left for so long. Basically, the throne doesn't always have to go through the bloodline, it can definitely go through marriage. So while Penelope is still there, acting as queen regent, whoever remarries her will be the king of Ithaca. Obviously very enticing. And because the suitors are all sons of like these elder councilmen or other powerful and rich men around Ithaca, they obviously see this as a golden opportunity. The elites of the land will not support Telemachus' bid for the throne if they themselves have a chance at it. And there is no army because Odysseus took it with him to the war. Also, if Penelope actually proclaims Telemachus as king, she is basically also officially proclaiming that her husband is dead and she has no rights to the throne, which also means that when Telemachus ascends, he will be all alone in his claim and she will not be able to help him. So basically, the best they can do is just wait for Odysseus to finally show up. As Penelope says in the movie, "In this world, a man does what he chooses, I do what I can." In these early seeds in Ithaca, we are also introduced to a couple side characters. So we have Eumaeus, who is a half-blind swineherd, who is a friend to Odysseus and the family. Mentor, Odysseus' friend, who is now a teacher and bodyguard to Telemachus. The good doggo Argos, who is very, very old and Odysseus' dog, and basically just waiting for him to come home so he can finally die in peace. And then there are the suitors. the suitors. Most of them were there to just eat, drink, and make a ruckus, but boy oh boy, did one of them deliver. I basically came out of the movie thinking, okay, time to get into Batman, because if Robert Pattinson is playing him, I need to get on board. How did it happen that the glittery Edward Cullen became the arbiter of my taste? I don't know. It's truly a mystery. Antinous, the main antagonist of the Ithaca part of the story, is basically the most vocal and most conniving one of the suitors. He really wants that throne, and so he's getting kind of really tired of Penelope's game, so he's basically starting to push for a coup where they will kill Telemachus and make Penelope marry somebody forcefully. He loves boasting that he would have gone to the war, he was so ready for battle, but Odysseus was the one who told him to stay home and told him to watch over his family. Yeah, sure, whatever you say. We'll get back to this. The movie is a bit more subtle about Telemachus departing Ithaca to go search for news of his father, to basically know if there's even a chance that he might be coming home or if he's just dead and gone. In the book, the presence of gods is so much more real, and so Athena, mostly in disguise, but somehow everybody just knows that they have just interacted with the gods, so I don't even know if that disguise is doing much. She really pushes for Telemachus to go on this journey, pushes him to confront the suitors, drive them from his house, and then go off and search for news of his father. So in the book he does. He actually gathers the council of elders, all the suitors, and a bunch of regular people, and basically starts publicly shaming the suitors for eating everything that he and his family own, and basically trying to drive him into bankruptcy. He then also requests for a ship and a crew that will then take him to search for news of his father. And of course it is Antinous that decides to be the front man and confront Telemachus, so he says, "Telemachus, insolent braggart that you are, how dare you try to throw the blame upon the suitors? It is your mother's fault, not ours, for she is a very artful woman." He then reveals that he knows about the trickery with the shroud. So the trickery with the shroud, obviously in the book and in the movie, she's making the shroud for Odysseus' father. But actually in reality, every evening she undoes multiple lines so that she's basically never done, because she is only doing this to buy some time. But of course, she has spies among her servants, and one of the spies is from Antinous, so he was informed of this trickery. Telemachus is then urged to send his mother back to her father, which would be a very, very expensive and also very dishonorable thing to do, but the suitors basically just gave him two options. Get rid of your mother so that we can fight amongst ourselves for the throne, or force your mother to marry one of us. It's that simple. There is a preacher who speaks of the prophecy that was made before Odysseus went to war, that he will come back in the 20th year of his absence, but obviously nobody believes him. Mentor, Odysseus' friend, also talks to the common people, asking them to not support this injustice and stand for the rightful heir to the throne, but this also falls on deaf ears. The suitors aren't even afraid of the possibility of Odysseus coming home. They say his blood would be upon his own head if he fought against such great odds. Yay. So yeah, Telemachus has almost no support, and so he, with almost no support, goes off to search for news of Odysseus. Penelope is not really included in this plan in the book, but in the movie she's actively against it. Basically, she mostly spends her time just making the shroud and actively cautioning Telemachus to not kill all the suitors because they are guests in their house, and so they are protected by the guest rights, no matter how much those guests have overstayed their welcome. There is a very important phrase that keeps reappearing throughout this movie. If there is one thing that you will remember after seeing this film, other than some horrific screaming, it will be the phrase Zeus's law. Everyone says it multiple times, and it's basically connected to one of the central themes. To very quickly describe it, because it will be expanded much more upon later, Zeus's law is basically do unto others as you would want it to be done unto you. Treat beggars with respect, because you never know if a beggar is actually a god in disguise. Treat your guests with hospitality. Let no harm be done unto them. Penelope has a really great quote here, one that kind of sums up the whole movie in the end. Structures are nothing without people's respect for their meaning. These are the common rules of civilization. They must be obeyed. Zeus's law. This is why Telemachus also has this hilarious phrase that he says every time he meets somebody new. You have wise eyes, Athena's eyes. To him, basically all of them are Athena in disguise, come to help him. And coming back to the adventure itself, thank God for Athena. Or I guess, thank the god Athena. In the book, she really arranges everything. The crew, the ship, Telemachus' mood, his itinerary, first going to Pylos and then to Sparta, to talk to Menelaus, the brother of Agamemnon, the two brothers that basically started the Trojan War, because Menelaus is most likely the one who would know which hole Odysseus could have fallen into. They don't say it like that, but I would. And so we set off to visit new people. In the movie, it's condensed to only Menelaus, but in the book, first in Pylos, Telemachus is warmly received by the king Nestor. He had a son who fought at Troy, but he died. He also has 3 other sons, 2 daughters, and seems a very kind and wise old warrior who really helps Telemachus on his journey, but can't actually give any information on Odysseus because he left Troy right after the sacking. There is, however, some info that he provides that's important, but in the movie this was reassigned to Menelaus, so that's how we'll do it a little bit later. We switch to the movie again. At this point, you have seen a lot of Tom Holland, but not much or barely anything of Odysseus. So we see some of the flashbacks of his life before Troy. We see his view on the recruitment to go to the war in Troy. Everybody knew that it's going to be a very long time before people will be able to come home, so they actually did the draft by lottery. Turns out, a lot of the noble families hid their sons from the draft. For instance, Antinous' family actually offered up a son of one of their servants, Sinon, played by Elliot Page, to take Antinous' place when he literally pulled the short stake out of the lottery bag. We see Odysseus hunting, showing off to the kids how good of a hunter he is, but that he also fights with honor because he plucks his bow once before shooting the animal, just so that he can give them a chance to escape. He is also warned that his cleverness will get him in trouble. We also see him demonstrating his prowess with the bow during celebration in a feasting hall, where he strings a bow that nobody else is able to string and then shoots through 12 axes into the bullseye. It's very impressive, nobody else can do it. It just shows how much of a great warrior Odysseus is. We see his and Penelope's conversation right before he goes to Troy, and she gives him a pin, a golden pin of hers, that is the likeness of Athena, which he then wears all the time, and she later uses to determine if the people that tell her about Odysseus have actually ever met him in person, or if they're just lying. Clever. She basically urges them to just kind of run away and escape the war, but Odysseus is an honorable man, and so he can't just sail away with her into the sunset. I wonder if anything will come of that. He also tells her of the ruthlessness of Agamemnon, one of the brothers that rallied the Greeks to the war. Turns out he sacrificed his daughter Iphigenia because he had beef with the goddess Artemis and so was denied favorable winds to get to Troy unless he sacrificed his eldest daughter. Yay! Neither the book or the movie go much further into that story, but Greek myths are just full of fun side quests like that. I just couldn't help myself. So, mythical side tangent number 1. In the myths, Iphigenia was a grown woman who was deceived by her father and brought out of the palace under the pretense of getting married to Achilles, when in fact she was about to be sacrificed. In the movie, she is depicted as a young child, maybe like 1 or 2 years old, but like, don't quote me on that, I'm terrible at estimating people's ages. Clytemnestra, the wife of Agamemnon, is obviously horrified in both versions, but also unable to save her child. In the movie, she's played by Lupita Nyong'o, who also portrays her sister Helen. You know, the one of Troy. Ever heard of her? Although they're actually not supposed to be identical twins. Their birth story is actually quite a doozy. So, Clytemnestra is the daughter of Tyndareus and Leda, king and queen of Sparta, so she's a Spartan princess. But before her birth, Zeus, being Zeus, lusting after every woman that he sees, transformed himself into an injured swan, of all things, and then when he got close enough to Leda, did with her what he wanted. How Hera put up with this horn dog, I will never understand. Well, afterward, Leda spent the night with her husband, and sometime later, gave birth to 2 eggs. Yes, eggs. This is a myth, after all, okay? Don't question me. So from one of the eggs came Helen and Pollux, the children of Zeus, and then from the other one, Castor and Clytemnestra, the children of the king. That genealogy tree would be just so fun to present at a school's show and tell, wouldn't it? Let's get back to Nolan. Okay, so finally Telemachus is on his way to meet Menelaus. He is warmly received, an honored guest, even without declaring his name right away. You know, Zeus's laws, all that. In the book, Telemachus actually arrives with the son of Nestor, and there's this hilarious scene where a servant of Menelaus sees them arriving and then runs to his master and says, "Ooh, I just saw these 2 cool-looking young men. They look incredible. They look like they could be children of Zeus. Should I invite them in and take their horses or just send them packing?" Even Menelaus is confused at these options and yells at his servant like, "What do you mean not let them in? Of course you let them in. We're past these rookie questions. Why are you asking me?" And then when he sees them himself, he actually says, "Ooh, you must be sons of kings, because poor people couldn't have children like that. Gee, thanks!" Movie Menelaus declares that Tom Holland is welcome to the feast, and they actually came at a great time because this is a day of a wedding. And funnily enough, in the book, it's a double wedding. So his son is marrying a local woman, so she's from Sparta, but his daughter is actually going off to Myrmidons to marry the son of Achilles, to whom Menelaus has promised his daughter when they were at Troy. Mythical side tangent number 2. This daughter, called by us never before heard name Hermione, was from a young age betrothed to Orestes. Who is Orestes, you might ask? Well, he's the son of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra. Wait, aren't Agamemnon and Menelaus brothers? Yes, they are. And aren't Clytemnestra and Helen at least half-sisters? Yes, they are. So these 2 were first cousins squared. So I guess it's a good thing that her father decided to break off the engagement and marry her to somebody not so blood-related. isn't it? Well, it didn't really matter because Neoptolemus, the son of Achilles, right after the wedding promptly decided to depart and go fight Apollo over the death of his father, and so got himself killed as well. So now Hermione was free to marry Orestes anyway. Yay! And they even had a child, Tessemenes, who had the great description of he only had 5 great-grandparents instead of the usual 8. And so the family tree becomes even more gnarly. The ancient Greeks. The appellations have nothing on us. So Menelaus starts telling these stories, quite unprompted I might add, about this incredible intelligent man who was the one who brought them the victory at Troy, the cunning genius, the man, the myth, the legend. So, of course, it's about Odysseus. He tells of the Trojan horse plot, and I have to say, that horse looked like nothing that I would have imagined. So, Sinon waits for days on the beach for the Trojans to actually pick up the horse. Of course, he first gets skewered to it by a sword, but once he actually says that this is a peace offering, a tribute to Athena, the Trojans say, common gods, respect the offering. This was a moment we actually saw right at the beginning of the movie, during the fleet, a trick, a thought, the man, the myth, the legend, the bard performance. What we did not get to see in the beginning of the movie was all the men cramped inside the horse, standing one on top of another, some of them actually drowning when the tide came. I mean, I don't know why they couldn't have placed the horse a little bit further up the beach, but whatever. But when the Trojans finally managed to get the horse into the city and up to the temple, which looked like a very difficult task, I might add, the Greeks wait until the dark of night, get out of the horse, kill a couple guards, and then open the gates to the city so that the rest of the army, who had previously sailed away a little bit and then came back, could sack the city and win the war. Though I do have to ask, if the Greeks had to sail away to not be seen by the Trojans, and the men in the horse had to wait for days to be picked up, how exactly did the Greeks know when to show up in front of the gates of Troy to be let in by Odysseus? I mean, if Sinon is dead, and the Greeks are floating somewhere in the sea, how exactly did they manage to get back so quickly? Or were they hiding somewhere on the land? Were they maybe burying themselves under the sand like the Fremen from Dune? I mean, I would have loved to see that sequence, but I don't think Nolan would want to resort to something that reminds us so strongly of a different epic movie of this time. Fun to imagine though. So Menelaus is going on and on about the righteous victory that they got, how they got what they came for, his beautiful lawful wife, though now she's a little bit less beautiful because he scarred half of her face, implying that maybe she wasn't strictly speaking kidnapped to Troy. But Helen, sitting next to him and looking completely unamused, actually starts kind of spitefully undermining his tale. She implies that the real reason that the Trojan War happened had actually not much to do with her, she was just a very convenient catalyst. So instead, Nolan implies, as suggested by many scholars, that if the Trojan War actually happened, then most likely the reasons were political and economic. The conversation shifts, with Telemachus actually telling the hosts his name and telling them the real reason why he came, to search for news of his father. Sadly, Menelaus can't really help him either, because he does know that Odysseus survived the war, but afterwards they split up on their journeys home, and he hasn't heard anything about him since. He suggests that Telemachus should stop chasing ghosts and hope, and instead go home to his mother, who is holding out as best as she can. In the book, both Menelaus and Helen are kind of portrayed a bit more soft and kind-hearted. When they find out who Telemachus is, they actually start weeping, and then Telemachus starts weeping, and then even the son of Nestor starts weeping. Everybody's crying at the table. I guess men in ancient Greece were just more in touch with their emotions. What a time to be alive. While Telemachus is on his journey, both in the movie and the book, we have short moments where we cut back to Ithaca. So now that the suitors know that Telemachus has left the building and is actually searching for Odysseus, they, and especially Antinous, want to use this opportunity to kill him on his way back. Apparently there are no Zeus's laws about killing people on the street. Small but not very mythical side tangent. I love how everybody everywhere tells Telemachus that he looks and talks so much like Odysseus. He has his feet, his hands, his arms, what have you. And when in the movie Robert Pattinson wants to kill Telemachus and actually have proof of it, he instructs them to bring him his nose. And when asked if he will recognize him from just his nose, he actually says, oh, okay, also bring me his ears. Well, please tell me in the comments, would you recognize your loved one's nose and ears if they were like chopped off and brought to you? Because I sure as hell wouldn't. To close off the story of visiting Menelaus, there is one more interesting tidbit of information that we received. Later during a hunt, Telemachus actually asks Menelaus if he could speak on the fate of Agamemnon, because earlier he seemed kind of angry about it. Well, it turns out that while Agamemnon did manage to make it home safely and was warmly received by his people and his wife Clytemnestra, he was also warmly and promptly murdered by her as revenge for killing their daughter. I mean, she stewed on it for over 10 years. Can you really blame her? The myth elaborates that she was either willingly involved or seduced by a different man, who then also called on her to plot against her husband once he comes home. Though in most tellings, he was the one who killed Agamemnon, not his wife. Of course, everybody kills everybody in these Greek myths, so later on her son Orestes kills her and her new companion. Menelaus comes home pretty late. It took him like 8 years to come back to Sparta, and so he learns about all of this post factum. The curious thing about the book, though, is that Menelaus actually finds out, after a weird conversation with a weird seaman, magical guy, that Odysseus is being held prisoner by the nymph Callisto on an island, and that he can't leave because he has no ships and no sailors to take him. And he actually tells Telemachus that, so Telemachus should now know that his father is actually alive. And now that I have mentioned Calypso, we have a convenient way to segue into the next part of the story, the one that's actually about Matt Damon. So we come about in both stories, both the movie and the book, into the tale of Odysseus' adventures in the way of him relaying these adventures to others. So in the book, Athena actually petitions the gods to finally allow Odysseus to leave Calypso's island and basically force her to let him go, especially now because Poseidon is far away and can't really intervene too much. What Poseidon's problem here is, we will learn a little bit later. Once Hermes relays this message of the gods to Calypso, she's really unhappy and angry, but can't really go against the will of the gods. So she goes to the sad and downtrodden Odysseus, who has spent now 7 years on this island being basically kept prisoner, and helps him build a raft, gives him some food and clothes, and then sends him on his way across the sea to the land of the Phaeacians. Phaeacians? I'm not completely sure. Excuse my pronunciation. The journey there is very difficult, and Poseidon is definitely not merciful, but Athena helps him everywhere as if he were her own child. He gets to the Phaeacian court, and he's very warmly received. He's given food and drink and clothes, and promised help on his journey home. At a tournament, he kind of gets pestered by a younger guy into showing his physical abilities, and he wows everybody, and then he cries at a song about the war in Troy, and so the king of the Phaeacians is like, so what exactly is your name? You never actually told us. And this is where Odysseus starts to relay his adventures to them and to us. So that's in the book. The movie goes about this quite differently, and I cannot say that I'm a fan of the changes. Though Charlize Theron looks pretty cool in a fishnet top, Odysseus, sad, all day, every day, goes to the beach to pick up wood for a raft. And he doesn't even really know why, and that's because he's eating a lot of lotus flower that is apparently blocking most of his memories. Now though, suddenly, for no clear reason, Calypso, or Charlize Theron, I think Charlize Theron is the cooler name, decides that it's time for him to remember. It's been 7 years. Why now? Well, there is no good reason, it's just time for the plot to move along. So now she starts taking away his lotus flower, and because of that, his memories are coming back, and he's telling them to her. So here we go. After the dealing with Troy is done, everybody goes on their own way. 10 years on this fucking beach. Let's go home. Amen, brother. Agamemnon offers Odysseus to sail with him and stick together, but he says, I've followed Agamemnon long enough. So him and his men set off along routes that are not very well known. Though his men are a little bit skeptical, 3 ships leave with him from Troy, and their first stop is to sack a city nearby. Lucky bastard, as one of his crew says when they actually see land, because they went the route less traveled. Nobody knows when they will actually see land. It's a risky move. Well, apparently all the people from the town ran away, because when they saw them approaching, they thought that those were the seamen. TM. It's mysterious. Odysseus is like, no, we're not the seamen. We're just the Greek. Just destroyed Troy. We're the good guys. And then when they're leaving the city, an old man actually even tells them that if they go west, they will not like what they find. Next, they find the island with the cyclops. Lucky bastard again, isn't he? They follow a sheep into a cave, and while they don't really know who lives there, and the man from Odysseus' crew just want to steal some cheese that they find there and then leave, he actually urges them to stay. There's Zeus's law. It will protect them. They are guests, and guests are not to be harmed. Cocky of him, isn't it? Of course, when the Cyclops comes back with his sheep, he turns out to not exactly be a very talkative guy. He just grabs 2 men, eats them, and then nicely goes to sleep. And when Odysseus is asked why he didn't talk to them, he says, well, would you talk to ants? And I mean, valid. The Cyclops design was very creepy and very unsettling. There's just something very wrong about seeing an eye at an angle like that. Very nicely done, Nolan. Maximum creepiness was achieved. So the men can't run because the Cyclops has put a large boulder in front of the opening of the cave that the men can't move, so they can't even kill him in his sleep because then they will be trapped. They prepare to make a break for it next day when the sheep are leaving, but while a couple men escape, a lot of them are also captured and eaten. In the evening, the Cyclops is back, and to make him less of a problem, Odysseus and his men sharpen a very large wooden spike and drive it into his eye to blind him. I've seen people rave about the Cyclops sequence, especially this scene, and I did find it very chilling and unsettling, something very surreal about the way he was munching on people, kind of very otherworldly, but I can't say that I was much of a fan of this very loud shrieking that came after the stabbing scene. It was just so loud, I actually had to close my ears in the theater. It was too much. At night, the men actually hear the Cyclops pray to Poseidon, who is his father, to bring vengeance upon the men that have hurt him. Nonetheless, the next day the men infiltrate a flock of sheep to escape the cave, and they get out. But of course, Odysseus has to have some flaws, and so in his anger, he turns around and shoots an arrow into the eye of the Cyclops, who is already kind of harmless at this point. He, of course, gets really pissed and then starts chasing them to the ships. Two men are actually eaten right there in the water on the beach because the Cyclops can swim a little bit, and so he gets them in the shallows. Yum! Homer's Odyssey plays this quite differently. So they also sack a city, and when Odysseus wants to leave, the men decide to start chilling out and drinking and eating food and just relaxing on the beach. And so when the reinforcements arrive from the other cities, everybody has to run and they lose a couple of men. Then they find an island with people who feed their scouts lotus flowers, which are not necessarily dangerous for you, but they do make them forget everything that they want to do and their desires, and the only thing that they now want to do is stay on the island and eat even more lotus flowers. This is obviously where the reference in the movie with Calypso came from. Because of this, Odysseus has to forcefully detox the men, put them on the ship, and sail away. By the way, he has 12 ships in the books. 12, not 3. They next get to the land of the Cyclopses, and again, they find the cave, and the men want to grab some cheese and sheep and leave, but Odysseus really wants to meet the Cyclops. He knows that it's going to be a Cyclops, and he wants to see if he's a savage or if he's civilized like them, and he also wants to get some presents from him. His introduction to the Cyclops in the book is, we are the people of Agamemnon, who has won infinite renown throughout the whole world by sacking so great a city and killing so many people. Well, good for you, man. We therefore humbly pray to you to show us some hospitality, and otherwise make us such presents as visitors may reasonably expect. Well, damn, let me just go over there and grab you all the presents that you might want, or great warrior who killed so many men. Or better yet, how about I just eat a couple of you? Then there will be less great warriors. I think that would be better for everybody. Wouldn't you agree? So after the Cyclops eats 6 of his men, Odysseus offers him some strong wine and says, "You ought to be ashamed of yourself. How can you expect people to come see you anymore if you treat them in this way?" I think he doesn't want to have any visitors. You know, Odysseus, not everybody wants to host. The Cyclops loves the wine and asks for more, and then he also asks for Odysseus' name. And he famously replies, "My name is No Man." I read the Butler translation. It's No Man, not No One, just so you know. Of course, then, as a gift, the Cyclops just offers him to eat him last out of his men. That's a gift. Thank you so much. Well, after he is good and drunk and basically starts throwing up, Odysseus and his men, who have also prepared this large wooden beam, put it in the fire, make it really hot, and then stick it in his eye, blinding him. When the Cyclops starts screaming like crazy, all the other Cyclopses from around start running to the cave, asking Cyclops, "Is everything okay? What's wrong with you?" But then, of course, he starts yelling, "No man is hurting me! No man is trying to kill me!" And they're like, "Yep, that checks out. Nothing sounds weird here. If no man is hurting you, then, good luck with your stomach cramps. See you tomorrow. Good job." Odysseus is, of course, very proud of his clever stratagem, as he says, and the next day they use the sheep trick, just like in the movie, to escape the cave. They get to the ship and start sailing off, but of course Odysseus cannot just calm down and leave. He has to have some flaws that he will learn from, so he starts boasting, "Heh heh, you didn't know how smart I was and ate my man, so the gods punished you for mistreating your guests." And the Cyclops is obviously very angry and throws the top of a mountain at them, and it almost hits the ship. Good job. Of course, the men are like, "Odysseus, can you please calm down? Can you, not say anything? Can we just escape and be okay?" But Odysseus, of course, the idiot, yells that if anybody asks who hurt him, say that it was the valiant Odysseus, son of Laertes from Ithaca. Why don't you just give him your social security number? And maybe also the pin to your credit card. Give him all the info he ever might need. I mean, anybody who calls themselves valiant, I think deserves every hardship that's coming to them. Boasting is very unbecoming. So, of course, then the Cyclops yells at him from the island somewhere in the distance that he will tattle on him to his father Poseidon, and that he will never make it home, and even if he makes it home, he will be all alone, having lost all of his men and all of his stuff. Of course, Odysseus doesn't really listen to that, and so they sail on. Next in the book, they visit an island with a very hospitable family of the god Aeolus, the god of winds, who married his 6 daughters to his 6 sons. But who's judging? So they stay here for a month. Odysseus is entertaining the god with his stories. The god is very hospitable. It's all going very nicely. When it's time for them to leave, the god even gives them a gift. He, the master of winds, has bound all the other winds into a bag and closed it tight with a silver thread, leaving only the west wind blowing about. So this is the only wind that they might need to quickly get home to Ithaca. Very nice of him. Of course, even the best laid plans go awry when people get involved, because after 9 days of great travel and no issues, Odysseus falls asleep, and apparently he was not supposed to fall asleep with this, because his crewmen become jealous and curious, and they want to know what great treasures the god Aeolus gave to Odysseus. And and so they open the bag. Of course, they let out all the winds, and the storm that comes actually drives them back, literally back, all 9 days' journey to the island of Alos again. First, the family is very surprised, like, why did you come back? We sent you on your way so nicely with a great gift. You should be home by now. And then, of course, he says, like, oh, my man didn't listen to me. My man betrayed me. They opened the bag, and now the storm drove us here. And after this, the reception is not warm at all. Alos literally says he will not help somebody whom the heavens hate. So he tells Odysseus and his men to get out. From then on, there are no more winds, and so the journey is very slow and very hard. And then they get to the land of Laestrygonians. Turns out they are less men and more giants and ogres, and they eat people. So they chase the men off the island and then start throwing rocks onto their ships from cliffs, and they destroy 11 of the 12 ships that Odysseus has. Of course, only the ship with Odysseus escapes. Going back to Nolan. After the Cyclops, the ship lands at a shore and everybody decides to go explore the woods. It is of course questionable why exactly every place that they encounter looks like they have shored up somewhere in Norway, all forests and trees, but I really don't have a good answer for you there. So all the men decide to take a stroll in the woods and then stumble upon a child. The child looks a little bit confused, but then it lets out like an ear-piercing scream and runs away. While the men stand there confused, instead of the child, horrifyingly tall people clad in steel armor appear and start chasing them. Everybody tries to run for the ships, but apparently the forest is magical as well, because the trees start moving and start trapping people so that the giants can get to them. Nice! In the end, just like with the Laestrygonians, or maybe those were the Laestrygonians, we don't really get an answer for that, but only Odysseus' ship gets to leave. The other two he has lost, along with all their men. To me, this was probably the most horrifying scene of the movie. Just something about these giants was a lot more otherworldly than both the Cyclops and the upcoming Scylla. Like they were robots, completely out of place. And I did read a comment on Reddit about these people being clad in steel armor, basically being the equivalent of somebody during the Revolutionary War showing up in Kevlar. And I mean, that seems quite accurate. Nonetheless, the choice to put them on every single poster was, I think, a little bit of a questionable one. Did Nolan really also think that they were like the most menacing monster around? Or was this like outrage marketing? I don't know. What do you think? Please write in the comments what your thoughts are on these monsters and their use in every type of promotional material. I'm still so unhappy with this. So after this misadventure, of course the crew concludes that Odysseus is a jinx. He is cursed. He has incurred the wrath of Poseidon. Of course, in this movie, he didn't boastfully reveal his name, but like, how hard do you think it is for a god to find out who hurt his son if he really wants to know? Come on. So when they arrive at the next island, the crew actually tells Odysseus to please stay with the ship, please don't interfere. We will go with a small search party, search the island, but you stay here. He isn't exactly happy about it, but acquiesces and declares that he will just go and hunt for something for their dinner. So now we get two plot lines where we kind of cut from one to the other. The men go through the island and they see like a weirdly calm lion, tiger, puma, I think leopard, and then they find a house of a lonely woman. She looks terrified, of course, but Odysseus' men are like, no, it's gonna be fine, we won't hurt you, we're just very hungry, could you give us some food? And in the meantime, Odysseus is hunting for some animals and sees a deer. He shoots the deer, and upon the deer's death, he discovers that the deer actually turned into a man. So something's up. So he goes to look for his men, and in the meantime, Circe, whose house it was, is feeding the men stew, and they're eating it very ravenously. They really just can't stop shoveling into their mouths. And then came a scene where I actually had to look away. I'm not a person who can handle body horror. I actually haven't seen Titan yet, even though I'm very interested, but I just know I can't handle it. I barely got through the substance. So here we see Circe start like molding and shaping the heads and the bodies of the men. It's very grotesque and it's very physical. And then when she's done, they turn into pigs. Odysseus arrives, and the conversation starts that just looked very weird. It kind of simultaneously looked like he was hypnotized, suspicious, and confused. It's like they couldn't decide whether to show that he right away figured out the deception, or to have him really not understand what's happening until he understands what's happening. But like, you just shot a deer that turned into a man, so maybe don't pretend that you will eat your food, and don't pretend that you don't know where her pigs come from. Oh well. He threatens the crow that is in her room, that is apparently her sister, who has also been transformed. It's just her hobby, transforming people into animals. And so after the threatening, she transforms the pig back into his men. They get some food, no meat this time, but not before Circe has this great monologue about men and their appetites. Too much is never enough. And of course it doesn't only apply to food. And I think by the end you actually think, yeah, body horror can be fun if the woman is very angry. I read the book Circe by Madeline Miller, and I really enjoyed it, so I kind of really welcomed the part of the plot that revolved around Circe. Of course, there, just like in the book from Homer, Odysseus stays with her for like over a year and they become lovers. Homer's Circe is a bit of a weird character. When she tries to charm Odysseus with her potions, and it doesn't work because he's protected by Hermes' charms, every god just wants to protect Odysseus. She says, "Oh, you must be the long prophesied Odysseus, who is the hero of Troy. Come now, sheath your sword and let us go to bed, so that we may make friends and learn to trust each other." Questionable choices, girl. Questionable choices. Movie Circe does help him along on his journey and tells him that he needs to cross the Oceanus and enter the underworld. She also gives him some prophecies about Scylla, Charybdis, the Sirens, and the Cattle of Helios. I really like the section of the story about Circe. I mean, all the actors were pretty good, but some of them just really stood out, and I would definitely say that Samantha Morton was one of them. She just had this like pain and ferocity and righteous fury behind her eyes. You just couldn't help but enjoy watching her. And apparently she's a cat person, with all the lions and tigers on the island, so how could she not have my vote? Now the ship departs for the underworld, and I have to say, it was a surprisingly short journey. There they had to do a sacrifice of 2 goats, and I really hope those were not men. I mean, I'm pretty sure they were not men, but like, could somebody check, please? Please? Once that is done, a bunch of shades appear, ghosts of people who knew Odysseus, and a lot of the ones who died at Troy. So the first to come up, drink the blood of the sacrifice, and then speak is Sinon. He chastises Odysseus for not letting him in on the plan and for letting him die without even knowing that the other men were like basically right behind him inside the horse. Although he also says that this wouldn't be much of a comfort anyway. He also says that Antinous, remember him? We will get back to him, actually cheated his family and didn't pay them the money that was owed to them because Sinon went to the war instead of him, and so his father died in poverty. So he makes Odysseus promise that when he returns to Ithaca, he will return the short stick that Sinon got for the draft to Antinous where it belongs. Next is Agamemnon, and I haven't mentioned him, but I have to say, the armor that they used for him was just insane. It looked so unreal, it was like CGI, just so shiny and smooth and black. I mean, I get that it was probably ceremonial, but he was wearing it when they opened the gates to Troy, and he was like standing right there, in the middle, in the center, being tall and huge. In the center, in the middle, being tall. If you know, you know. And he didn't even get a single scratch on it. Damn. So he tells Odysseus what has happened to him upon his return home, the revenge from his wife and whatever, and he warns him to also be careful when he returns home, to not expect kisses and fanfare because everything could have changed. And then the other shades, the ones from his unburied comrades, start chasing him and his other still alive men, and so they have to run back to the ships. There's just a lot of running away from stuff in these movies. The book version of the underworld is quite similar, but different characters appear. There is no Sinon, but Odysseus' own mother appears, and she tells him a little bit about the situation at Ithaca at the time of her death. Then a whole slew of famous characters from Greek history and myth come by, all with their own tale, and in the end we do get to see Agamemnon again, who is again complaining about being slain by his wicked wife and her lover. He says, "I even heard as she killed Cassandra, the daughter of Priam, right next to me. Fancy murdering her own husband." I mean, yeah, too bad, so sad. I killed her child and then went off to war for 10 years, and then I brought back a concubine that was basically also a slave. Whatever could have made her become so angry at me. After this, there is no trusting women. Boo-hoo! I hope she stabbed you a bunch more times as well. It's a new and brighter day, specifically to get out of the underworld. So, new adventure awaits. Next come the Sirens, where Odysseus famously plugs the ears of the men with wax, but has himself tied to the mast so that he can hear the song. It's a cool scene, and one of the men actually takes out the wax and jumps overboard, but it still seems like a kind of unjustified big risk. He still is presented as somebody prideful, somebody who wants to be a legend. His second in command, Eurylochus, says that this is a bad idea, nobody has ever done it, to which Odysseus replies, "That's why it's a good idea. I'll be the first." The song itself, as he describes it later, was of all the promises that he failed to keep. Beautiful and heartbreaking, and also maybe neck-breaking because he was struggling hard to try to get out of those ropes. Looked like he's not gonna survive it. They then get to the cliff monster Scylla and the whirlpool of Charybdis. So navigating between them is incredibly hard, and the only option to really get out is for Odysseus to drive them past Scylla, sacrificing 6 of his men, because that's how many she can grab at a time. The men are appalled later that he didn't tell them about this danger, but Odysseus points out that there really was no other choice if they ever want to get home. Both monsters were quite terrifying, but I would have to say that the CGI on Scylla was a little bit funny. I guess there was just no real good way to not make the monster look like, well, a male appendage. Or 6 of them. They finally reach the island with Helios's cattle, and it's incredible cattle. But Odysseus has been warned multiple times that if they eat any of it, none of his men are making it home, and he will come back years later, haggard, all alone, and having lost all of his stuff. So he really just tries to not even land on the island, but the crew really insists. So then he finally actually tells them about the prophecies, that they will die if they eat any of it. And he makes them promise, solemn promise from every single one of them, that they will not touch the cattle, and they make this promise. And they actually hold it for quite a while, but of course once they docked, favorable winds never came again, and so the men started starving. And so one night Odysseus wakes up and sees them eating the cattle, in a dugout hole, hiding it from him. Odysseus chastises them a little bit, saying like, well, I don't see it maybe, but the gods definitely do, and now we are doomed. Well, suddenly the favorable winds come back, and everybody runs back to the ship, trying to leave the island. But of course it's just a ploy by Zeus and Helios to lure them into the sea, and so then they start a huge storm. And the men actually have the audacity to yell at Odysseus, pray to Poseidon, "Sir, you are the one who did the thing. You had to have the hamburgers." So the ship is wrecked, and Odysseus is the only one who floats on the sea for a little bit and then shores up on the beach of the island where Calypso lives. And here ends his tale to Calypso in the movie and to the Phaeacians in the book. In Nolan's version, she basically says, "You were the only man who washed up, so I cared for you, and then I fell in love with you." What else was she supposed to do? I mean, yeah, I can see that. She was banished to the island so long ago, and she's there all alone, so of course he's the only viable prospect for her. Why would she ever let him go? It just truly makes no sense. Nolan tries to tie this to the like, lose control, surrender to your fate, and live message, but that is also just insane. By the end of the movie, we're supposed to see him as humbled and ready to accept his fate, but in the story of this movie, he has been out of it for like 7 years and only started remembering stuff the last 2 days. But sure, now he's ready to go home. Maybe his subconscious was working on it, I don't know. It just didn't make much sense to me. Suddenly she decides, you can go home now, and he decides, oh, I remember everything, I do have to go home now. In a similar vein, a lot of the events that happened to Odysseus in the book basically just happen because they have to happen, because they were prophesized to happen like that. He himself has surprisingly little to do with his own fate. The Cyclops was already told that one day he will come, Circe was already told that one day he will come and then she shouldn't hurt him. There's just entirely too much fate and gods in that whole story. I mean, it does make sense, considering when and where and by whom it was written, and about what time. But it does become glaringly obvious that no matter what he does and what he chooses, it's all gonna work out the way it has to work out, and he can't actually affect anything. It got dark. The lighting keeps changing. In contrast, Nolan kind of tries to exclude the theme of fate and gods controlling and meddling in the story, but it just never feels complete. It was interesting that we never see or hear from Poseidon, and yet Odysseus' men are sure that they have incurred his wrath because of every storm that they encounter. Or that there was thunder when Telemachus said that a beggar might be a god in disguise, but it was just basically a lucky coincidence. We never outwardly see the gods. Sort of. Stay with me. We'll get to her. But still, many of the events imply that they are there. Too many coincidences to just be coincidences. As soon as they eat the herd of Helios, the wind is back, which lures them into the storms, which kills all the men but Odysseus. They literally travel to the underworld. Every attempt to remove the god's agency and give it back to Odysseus felt just kind of very half-hearted, as if there was just still the story of the god's wrath to be told. At a certain point, I just really started thinking that maybe after the sack of Troy, the Greeks were cursed, and so when Odysseus sacked the tiny city afterwards, he kind of sealed their fate. And so afterwards, his ships kind of crossed over into this parallel magical world, where cyclopses and giants in steel exist, where Scylla and Charybdis exist, where you can travel to the underworld. Then he's basically in a coma for 7 years, and then once he wakes up, the waves carry him to Ithaca, as was his fate all along. I guess this is now my headcanon. He traveled into fairyland and then came out when and where he was needed. He also ate a lot of protein because there were a lot of muscles on those arms. Or maybe he was weightlifting Calypso every day for hours on end. But now let's make a short jump back in time, and I will tell you what my favorite character of the movie is up to. The lovable scamp Antinous, knowing that Telemachus is gone for the time. Remember Tom Holland? Yeah, I swear, he's coming back at some point. Decides to take a gamble and go for it with Penelope. He finally reveals to her that he actually knows about her deception with the shroud, because of course in her household he has some spies. He tries to convince her that Odysseus obviously isn't coming back. She shouldn't try to keep all the weight on her shoulders. Ithaca needs a new king, and she needs a husband who will cherish her. It's time for you to live again. Robert Pattinson is just so devious and snaky, so slimy and conniving, you just want to continuously punch him in the nose. It's ravishing to watch. On a side note, I love it when characters ask completely stupid questions. Penelope says, "Why would you want to marry someone who loves someone else? Why do you think, woman? You come with a kingdom. Have you forgotten?" And he almost has her until she asks, "But what about Telemachus?" And he says, "The throne is his. He is the heir. Unless we have children of our own." Haha. Whoops, no thanks. Jeez, almost stepped in it. So now Antinous really starts plotting against Telemachus to have him killed on the way home. And this is where the conversation about his nose and the ears comes up. I will think about this conversation forever. I will forever be thinking of Tom Holland's nose and ears. Thanks, movie. Antinous' men come to the pig herder's house and are very mean to him. They kill all of his helpers and all of his dogs, and then take all of his pigs. But of course, as luck would have it, Odysseus, who finally washed up on the shores of Ithaca, comes by literally later that same day, and of course he is in disguise. So he learns about the plot to kill Telemachus and runs ahead to Pylos, where at a temple, Antinous' men have killed all the actual priests and have replaced them. So when Telemachus comes by later to, I don't know, spend the night, bring some offerings, I didn't quite catch that part, they attempt an ambush. Of course, Odysseus moves faster, what with having starved for days on a raft and then having slept on a beach. Duh. Mentor, Telemachus' bodyguard, is poisoned, but then Odysseus intervenes, and his old friend sees him and recognizes him right before he dies. Side tangent. Bet you forgot that those were happening, haven't you? I didn't realize, until I was looking stuff up later, that Mentor is named Mentor because he's the original mentor. Like, the word for mentor, as in teacher and guide, is literally taken from this character in history. Isn't that insane? A person so old that their name is literally a noun to us now. Bonker balls. So Odysseus shows off his crazy fighting skills and kills them all. There were like 7 or 8 plotters, and Telemachus was quite useless. He really doesn't seem like he's taking after his father in his like warrior skills. So Odysseus introduces himself as a friend of himself from Troy and helps Telemachus escape. He then instructs him to go to Ithaca by ship as a cool traveler who has just completed his journey and then hold a feast with the suitors. He also urges him to convince his mother to decide to remarry and hold a competition for this coveted position. Homer also finally brings Odysseus home to Ithaca via the Phaeacians. They are so incredibly kind to him, and yet when they bring him and leave him on the shore, he doesn't right away recognize it because of the fog, and so he goes, they left me in a strange land and they could have pilfered some of my gifts. Let me count all my money again. I mean, come on, man. You're actually gonna count the gifts of the people who were so kind to you, and they give you a bunch of riches just because. And Poseidon is so pissed at them because he actually considers them to be his people, the seafarers, and they helped Odysseus. How could they? And so he actually turns their ship to stone right off the shore of the town and wants to bury the whole town under a mountain. So now they will never be that hospitable again. Great. And Odysseus sure does love to lie and spin a tale to everyone. Athena appears to him as a young girl and tells him where he is, but he doesn't believe her and then tells her a crazy story about who he is. And when she accosts him and shows him that she's actually Athena, he whines and complains that she stopped helping him after the sacking of Troy. My man, surely you can do stuff on your own, right? You had no trouble pillaging, maybe you should have done less adventuring and just laid low. But Athena doesn't really care, and so she sends Odysseus to the swineherd, and she herself goes to warn Telemachus, who's still chilling about somewhere in Sparta with Menelaus, about the plot that the suitors will try to kill him on the way home. Odysseus finds the swineherd, the like one loyal person in all of Ithaca, and then tells him an even crazier story about who he is. Somehow in every story, even when he's not Odysseus, his adventures do not become less valiant and complicated. But this part actually made me think that Nolan did not have the budget for the pigs, because apparently in the book, the swineherd is supposed to have like 360 pigs in his herd. Like, damn, no wonder the suitors are never leaving. Whereas in the movie, it literally looked like he had like maybe 10 pigs. It was at this moment that I thought, if I have to read the phrase, when the child of morning, rosy-fingered dawn appeared, again, I will have to start throwing stuff. There was a couple of phrases like that in the book that kept repeating, but this one was just so specific and so weird, I just couldn't handle it anymore. There was another one at the beginning of the book that was kind of really funny to me. When some character advises another to get the story from a third party, they say, "Beg of him to speak the truth, and he will tell you no lies, for he is an excellent person." And we hear this exact same phrase twice in very close succession, and I just couldn't help but think, so if I don't beg them for the truth specifically, will they just tell me a bunch of lies, just like Odysseus apparently does to everybody? Or what? I don't know, it just really jumped out to me. And by the way, while we're talking about writing and language, small semi-mythical tangent here. The word of the day is hecatomb, means great public sacrifice, usually in the form of 100 oxen to the gods. And you thought our animal raising is impressive. I did really love that when looking for a dictionary explanation, I was offered this sentence. After Pythagoras discovered his fundamental theorem, he sacrificed a hecatomb of oxen. It is considered a myth, but wouldn't that be something to be taught in math class? After you make a scientific breakthrough, go slaughter some animals, please and thank you. Back to the story, movie first. So, Telemachus, after being saved by his father and not knowing that this is his father, goes home, arrives very fancy looking and happy and smiley and greets his mother. Bestest man on screen, Pattinson, looks so haggard, drunk at noon, and not giving a fuck. But he is of course very much not pleased to see that Telemachus is still alive. The conversation between Telemachus and Penelope is kind of a curious one. He tells her that there are no news of his father and that she probably should just remarry. She would really rather lock the doors, set the fire, and burn the bastards. Anne Hathaway was so mad, it was her time to shine, and she shone bright. When Telemachus asks her why he can't take the throne, is it just because she doesn't want to give up being queen, she so angrily and fiercely tells him that you barely have stubble on your chin. I have been at this for 20 years governing. I have the experience. And you just kind of want to clap. You go, girl. But of course, it would have been nice to see at least one scene of her actually governing instead of just, doing arts and crafts in the room over there. But I guess we only had the budget for one room in Ithaca, just like we only had the budget for 3 ships and 10 pigs. Well, she is thoroughly peeved because she thinks that her son actually decided to give up hope that her husband will ever come home. And I decided that this casting choice really worked for me. She has the emotion, the heart, the longing, but also the stoicism and the stubbornness that really would be needed for her to survive this long. She is regal, but also feminine. Like, no wonder everybody's lining up to marry her. And for the kingdom. Don't forget the kingdom. Why would you marry somebody who loves someone else? Gee, what do you think? Telemachus' casting was fitting, but also kind of funny. Tom Holland played really well with this, teenaged angst, really wanting to do something, but having no idea what to do. I don't know if that was the intention, but that's kind of what I got. But he also felt really young. He is 20, and by 20 in those times, people have killed monsters and fought in wars, but he doesn't really seem like he's very good at fighting, nor does he know how to rule or be diplomatic. It just kind of upset me at times. I really wanted him to be a bit more put together. But for what Telemachus was, I think Tom Holland played him really well. And I already sang all the praises needed for Robert Pattinson, such a sparkling guy. I just couldn't keep my eyes away from his hateful face whenever he showed up on screen. Top 5 you love to hate them list. Such a fun weasel. Ramping up. So, the feast starts and the suitors arrive. Telemachus meets Odysseus, who is of course dressed in the latest beggar fashion money can buy in Ithaca, right outside his house. And there, right next to the door, is Argos. You remember at minute 4, I mentioned Odysseus' old dog. Really old dog that was just waiting for Odysseus to come home so that he can die in peace. Well, there he is, and he sees Odysseus, and he recognizes him, and he wags his tail, and then he dies. And if there was a moment in the movie where I would have gotten emotional, that would have been it. But somehow, I restrained myself. Maybe it was just me writing notes furiously, spreading ink all over my fingers, that I just kind of missed my moment to be emotional. So Telemachus sees this, and just from that, he knows that this is his father. You are Odysseus. Yes, indeed. No shit. They have a moment to look deeply into each other's eyes, and then the plan must commence. Though I have to say, there wasn't much of a plan, other than just Odysseus pretending that he was at the war in Troy, draw the attention of Antinous, and then piss him off by giving him the draft steak that he got from Sinon. I cannot go on another tangent about the great face and expressive eyes of Robert Pattinson, so just believe you me, you can see every emotion you can think of on that man. It was just glorious to watch his realizations. The feast ends, and Penelope calls beggar Odysseus to come by and tell her about Troy and her husband. And now comes the emotional climax of the movie, and this is also where we get a lot of answers. Like, what exactly is it that troubles Odysseus? Why didn't he feel ready to come home earlier, as if it was his choice? And why is he seeing Zendaya? Oh right, haven't I mentioned her before? You must be thinking, so where exactly is Athena? She has been showing up to him from time to time, after all. She keeps having some little chats with him. She reminds him of home, about the will of the gods, about his inability to change human nature. She sort of tries to reassure him once he understands that his men are doomed. You can't save them from themselves. No one has free will in this world, apparently. Well, let me go back in time, about 8-ish years, to the sacking of Troy. Obviously, the ploy was very successful. The infiltration, the opening of the gates, the letting in all of the people from the Greek army. But once all those men, who spent 10 years just chilling on a beach, being bored out of their minds, got the taste of blood, Troy was doomed. The sacking of Troy is just a phrase until you really think about what it was like. Countless men just killing and burning everything in sight, overcome with such hatred that nothing can stop them and no action seems like too much. Men and their appetites. Even too much is never enough. And throughout this movie, we had been getting glimpses of Odysseus leaning against the stairs somewhere in the burning of Troy, looking horrified at something. And sometimes along with that scene, we would also see the head of a statue of a goddess rolling down the stairs. And you would think that this is just him taking in the scenery, the consequences of his clever stratagem, but in reality, as we find out from this final speech of his, this is him looking on as his men, the Greeks, are executing a Trojan priestess to Athena. Zendaya. And she's looking at him, horrified, telling him, no, don't do this. But men cannot be stopped. And so her head is chopped off. And while most of my mind was going, ooh, that was so clever, such a good twist, a tiny portion of my mind was going, okay, so can I now see Zendaya's head roll down the stairs, please? I mean, the statue head was not metaphorical, not an illusion. They really did destroy the statue of Athena, and her head was rolling down the stairs, but they also literally killed the priestess. And out of some kind of morbid curiosity, I kind of really wanted to see that shot of her head rolling down. But I guess Zendaya wouldn't want that to be out on the internet. That is a very weird image to have to deal with later, so I kind of understand why it wasn't included. A bit too easy for people to misuse when they want to be mean or weird. And so now we know exactly why the wise goddess Athena looks like a 25-year-old tiny girl. It all makes sense. Odysseus feels such immense guilt over the ploy, over what happened to the city, over what happened to the priestess. Like what the Trojan man said at the beginning of the movie, common gods, respect the offering. And the twist with Athena and Zendaya was a clever one, and actually, I kind of subscribe to the theory that there was never actually any Athena, that it was just his guilty hallucination all the time. I would have actually preferred it if she didn't say a single word to him. All the lines that she says could have been easily said by other people, and so she could have been just this specter that's haunting him, reminding him of his hubris, of his sliminess and cleverness, the one that doomed an entire people. Otherwise, her being there, but us not actually being sure if she's a real goddess or just a ghost that's haunting him, is just kind of a half measure. No other gods are there, but Athena is just stamping about, chatting it up with Odysseus. And so with this tale, Odysseus really tries to convey to Penelope that Troy was not a victory, not a justice, it was a tragedy, a shame on Odysseus's head, because he was the clever one. He was the one that set it all in motion. With his tiredness and his homesickness, he was the one who really desecrated Zeus's law. Ha! You had forgotten about that one, didn't you? So yeah, under the pretense of a peace offering, an offering to a common god, his personal champion, Athena, they broke all the rules of god and man, killed their host, and desecrated a city. One man's trick to break Zeus's law forever. And as Penelope said, structures are nothing without people's respect for their meaning. And as now she understands from his tale, we are the sea people, the strange and mystical terrors that come from the sea to pillage and kill, who have no respect for their traditions and customs and laws. And it would all be poignant enough and very deep, we didn't really need to hear her say, this is the end of the Bronze Age. I'm relatively certain nobody during the Bronze Age said this is the Bronze Age. That fourth wall break was kind of unnecessary. I think this is the end of an era would have been on the nose enough. Matt Damon's monologue is one of the best scenes of the movie for sure. While it does have this great setting and an epic battle, the story is so heartbreaking that you just kind of want it to all stop. The story is what matters, and history will tell of this gambit as a great military victory, not as what it was, an affront to God and man. But having heard all this, and having her heart crushed for the evil of mankind, I guess, Penelope makes a decision. And right on time, because Robert Pattinson was just about to sneak up on Tom Holland and stab him in the back. So she decides that she's done waiting around for Odysseus to show up when he's good and ready. She declares that she will remarry. She will choose a man tomorrow after a trial. And so the scene is set for an action-packed finale. Instructions are given out to take all the weapons out of the room, except for setting up some axes in a specific way for the challenge. The servants obey, but also some of the servants are spies, so they keep note of what is happening. Next day, everybody is gathered in the hall, and then the doors are sealed shut until the trial ends. Penelope carries out Odysseus's bow and says that she will marry the man who can string this bow and then shoot an arrow through the 12 axe heads. Of course, the stories of this bow are legendary, and everybody knows that so far only Odysseus has been able to actually do this, so the suitors are not very keen on this challenge. But they do line up in a semicircle around the room, and it is just kind of a balm to your soul to watch Antinous move back behind other men, because obviously he knows that he will not be up for this challenge. But then after many failures, obviously his turn arrives, and then instead of humiliating himself, he tries to humiliate Penelope with the sentiment of, okay, you had your fun, you proved that none of us are as good as Odysseus, no one can deal with the bow, but now you have to stop this charade, and just choose one of the men here. Now, woman, come on. And that's when Odysseus comes up, obviously still dressed as a beggar, asking for a chance to string the bow. All the suitors laugh condescendingly, but Penelope actually has hope in her eyes. So many times this year I have seen Anne Hathaway with tears in her eyes, but I would say this one was the best. After a bit of stroking the bow, no, it's not a euphemism, although in those times it actually could have been, Odysseus strings the bow and fulfills the challenge with a bullseye shot. Obviously Penelope is overjoyed, but she also knows that carnage is coming, and so she runs back to her room, closes the door, and lets Odysseus go to town on the suitors. The plan was always for Odysseus to kill as many of them as he can, or at least as many as needed until the others give up, because he has a bow and they have no weapons. So he gets a couple of good shots, and then hand-to-hand combats a bunch of the other men, but it just isn't believable that he could handle all of them. It is like that scene in Kill Bill, where Uma Thurman just fights the whole of Japanese mafia, just a few less flying limbs. Especially after a disloyal servant goes to the room above them, where they have stored all the weapons, and then makes a hole in the floor and starts dropping down spears and shields and swords to help the suitors survive and kill Odysseus. And so Telemachus goes to stop him, but apparently his fighting skills are not enough to defeat like a servant, because he gets knocked down like 3 times, while his father downstairs is just laying out man after man. It felt like Tom Holland really wanted a fight scene, but Christopher Nolan decided that he's not gonna go easy on him. Well, a couple weapons do get dropped down, and so Odysseus gets a couple arrow shots to the back and a few stab wounds, but evidently it's nothing, because he finishes up his fight by killing Antinous by stabbing him in the gut while looking him right in the eyes, but not before he sticks the draft stick from Sinon right into his mouth. And since for the entire fight, all that Antinous was doing was hiding behind every single column and just yelling to other people, "Shield! Take the sword! Use the spear!" and not actually doing anything himself other than hiding with this like crazed look on his face, it was one of the most satisfying moments in movie history to watch him get stabbed real good. Yay. Well, some men surrender, and Penelope comes out of her room and she welcomes her husband home. He stumbles over to her looking very much like he's on the verge of death, but she explicitly prohibits him from dying, and then we kind of get a fake out scene where we think he might not have made it. In it, Penelope, on the arm of Telemachus, who apparently also found some Fairyland lotus and fish, because like, damn those arm muscles, man, are walking down the harbor to a ship. The day is way too sunny and beautiful for it to be a sad ending, and so the ending is Lord of the Rings style. Frodo is sailing off to the Undying Lands. Or Penelope and Odysseus are going into exile, sailing into the sunset, going west, until they reach the lands where Odysseus has to pay tribute to all of the men that he didn't get to bury properly on his journey. So it's either like 3 or 12 ships of people. That's a lot of people. Small side note, he has a hilariously huge bandage on the side of his neck. It was kind of really distracting in the last moments of the movie. Another small side note, so now apparently Telemachus doesn't have anybody to help him with the governance? What about her 20 years of experience? Well, now apparently the stubble will have to help him. And speaking of beards, I was actually thinking that Odysseus apparently just grew very fond of his beard because it was very realistically looking and quite large. And then I actually read that Matt Damon had to grow out this beard for a year because Nolan refused to let him use artificial facial hair because he wanted it to move right. And I mean, I don't know what it would have looked like otherwise, but I do have to say, I had the thought that he has a very cool looking beard. Very impressive beard. All bushy and gray. Before my final thoughts, let's rewind a little bit to go over the ending of the book. I say ending, but actually the part of Odysseus coming home and setting up to deal with the suitors takes almost half the book. It's so very drawn out. So after he wakes up on the shore, Odysseus goes to the swineherd after Athena's urging, and he stays there a couple of days, and he tells a whole bunch of lies to him, and he kind of gets the lay of the land. In the meantime, Athena goes to fetch Telemachus from Menelaus, where he's just been chilling out the whole time. So Telemachus comes to the swineherd, Odysseus is introduced to him, and he lies to him as well. Apparently he really took Agamemnon's words to heart. He was really scared that he's gonna get murdered by somebody. So after a few days of this, he actually does reveal his identity to Telemachus, but somehow it was even more underwhelming than in the movie, where they literally just exchanged like 3 words and a stare between them. I don't know, the book version was kind of very unsatisfying. So Odysseus gets to the palace, and then he has to go through a couple side quests with like the servant and another beggar and the suitors. He gets to talk to Penelope as well, to whom he also lies a bunch, and basically just tells a lot of stories about how he met Odysseus and who he is. And I don't know, at this point in the story, all of the lies that he was telling to everybody and the ease with which he was coming up with them just kind of made him sound a little bit sociopathic. I don't know, aren't those the people that you should love and should have missed? It didn't sit right with me. There's also the scene of the old maid who's washing his feet, and she sees the scar on Odysseus's leg that he famously has, and so she instantly recognizes him. In the movie, the scene is really subtle. It's very nicely done. I really enjoyed it. But in the book, Athena literally has to divert everybody else's attention because Odysseus grabs the woman by her throat and threatens to kill her if she doesn't love him enough to obey him and not tell everybody that he's Odysseus. And like, after reading that, I was just thinking, I need to read some other translations of this because hashtag not my Odysseus. After the feast, Penelope also agrees to marry the man that will fulfill her challenge the next day, and Odysseus reveals his identity to the swineherd and another servant. The day of truth comes, and it all goes more or less just like it does in the movie, although after stringing the bow and shooting the shot, he kills Antinous first. What a loss. He, Telemachus, and the other 2 servants proceed to kill all the suitors. And here I would like to say that as the story of the book was going on, I was getting more and more annoyed at it. There was just so much Athena. She was everywhere. It was like he doesn't have to come up with anything interesting to do here because she just protects him all the time and lets him kill all the suitors. She was directing Telemachus to go over here, over there, talk to this guy, talk to that one. She helped him on his journey back. She hit Odysseus multiple times. She changed his appearance all the time. She was just doing way too much. Did she really have nothing better to do? I don't know. The overbearing was just too much to handle. It really seemed like nothing that Odysseus was doing was making any difference because she just decided that his story will have a happy ending and that's it. It shall be so. Will of the gods and all that. At least in the movie, they kind of tried to give him a little bit more agency, but I would say that those results are also sort of underwhelming. And it also leaves kind of a large plot hole, because in the book, Athena is actually the one who stops the further bloodshed from the families of the suitors. She literally comes down, reveals herself as the goddess in like the last sentences of the book, and says, "Stop this violence, you will be friends now. I say so." And so they are friends. Of course, they already have killed a bunch of people, but who cares about that? We just forget about that. But in the movie, we just kind of brush past it. And I mean, do Penelope and Odysseus really think that them going into exile will be enough to stop the families of the fallen suitors from seeking revenge? I mean, yeah, Telemachus didn't really hurt any of them, but doesn't in this situation usually the transitive quality apply? Like, you killed my son, I will kill yours, and all that? We already established that in this world, the gods don't directly intervene. So, like, why do we think he's gonna be totally fine? Oh well, just let them sail away. The final words between Penelope and Odysseus on the ship speak about the songs that are going to be sung about his deeds. And because they will be all that's left of him, people will forget about his mistakes and be doomed to repeat them. The end. So I feel like I already spelled out all of my thoughts on the movie while I was going through the recap, but let's just quickly go over them again. The actors were fine. Some were even really great. My top would be definitely Pattinson and Morton, so Antinous and Circe. After them would come Penelope and Eumaeus, the swineherd. Others were good enough in their roles, but I would say nothing to write home about. There I would put Telemachus, Odysseus, and Menelaus. The controversial castings of Helen Clytemnestra, Athena, and Sinon, for me, ended up kind of somewhere in the middle. I had no real issue with their casting in terms of like accuracy or whatever, but they really had so little screen time that they didn't really get to go into the depths of their characters. But I did like them well enough. Though when I learned that Elliot Page is almost 40, I kind of almost had to do a spit take. The cinematography. I know nothing here, so don't quote me. I mean, it did look cool for sure, but this is supposed to be an epic movie and from Nolan, no less, so that was kind of just par for the course. There were some really cool shots and sequences, like the opening, the cyclops, some of the monsters, the pig transformation. Definitely the Lystrigonians. And yet, it was all a little bit bleak, color-wise. I think I would have preferred a little bit more color. But that's just kind of neither here nor there. I would say this is probably just my personal preference. The costumes were not exactly what I would have imagined, but giving way to artistic interpretation, I was mostly fine with them. But that Agamemnon armor, I mean, I know I've seen people rave about how cool it looks, but I feel like it must be just men who thinks that he looks like Batman. And I mean, that's correct, he does look like Batman, but I just really thought he looked ridiculous. I'm sorry, nothing about him screamed, "I'm a real warrior." He looked like a mascot who was brought there to look intimidating and then actually not participate in the fighting. In a different movie, this would have been the costume of a comic relief character who comes, looks intimidating, and then runs away squealing at the first sign of danger. But that's just my opinion. As I said, with my undying love for Robert Pattinson, I will actually have to watch the new Batman movies, and then maybe after that, I will be in love with Agamemnon's outfit. Stranger things have happened. It got so crazy dark suddenly. Those clouds. It's gonna rain soon. I did feel like a lot of the locations didn't particularly look like Greece, especially the magical ones that he visits on his way home. I think somewhere along the way, he just like magic traveled to Avalon, you know, Great Britain, and then had his misadventures in the fog. The sound and mixing didn't bother me too much, although I saw a lot of people complain about it, but I feel like by now I'm just kind of used to subpar audio, but I do have to say that some of the scenes were just unnecessarily loud. Spare my ears, please. So what is left? The story. So between the book and the movie, I'm kind of two minds about this. Some aspects worked better in the movie, properly conveyed the horror, the emotion, the tension between the characters, but some aspects just worked better in the book, gave better context, inner thoughts of the characters, and more full circumstances of the situations. The god situation bugged me in both works equally, but differently. In the book, there was just way too much godly interference, even in situations where it felt like it wasn't necessary. Just felt like very heavy plot armor. And in the movie, the characters literally had plot armor, but there you couldn't even tell if this is because the godly presence or if it's just because the character is the luckiest bastard in the whole world. The Athena trickery was fun for a moment, but then it kind of brought more questions than answers. And I mean, sometimes ambiguity doesn't really bring too much, it just makes it more unsatisfying. Overall, I would give this adaptation of the Odyssey a 7 out of 10. It was a good film, film-wise. It was a decent story adaptation-wise. It was an interesting production and dedicated cast, But in the end, it just kind of didn't touch anything in my soul, which is surprising because I do love to cry. For all its epicness, I never kind of felt too connected to the characters, and in the end just kind of walked out thinking that this is not a movie that I feel like I want to watch again. But I would read a different translation of the book though. I am curious to see if I would be as annoyed at Odysseus in different iterations. There was so much anointing oneself with oil in that book. Should I do it too? Here, will this work? I applaud you for staying until the end of this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave in the comments any thoughts you have on the movie, the plot, the characters, the cyclops, the pigs, and the devious weasel Robert Pattinson. And with that, I hope you all have a great week. I'm now gonna go take a very long cat nap. Bye!